So the reason I do these rather long, convoluted online YouTube video surveys is I'm trying to shame the damp proofing industry, surveyors and damp proofers into understanding why rising damp is the most unlikely cause of damp in most properties, and definitely in London where groundwater is pumped out. Have a listen to the survey. There is a small error in the first section about Kenwood. In fact, they have not improved. Look at the end and I'll explain more. So here is the report from Kenwood. Kenwood is the leading, if you like, damp proofer in London. Damp proofing is against rising damp. There's no other reason for damp proofing a property unless it's below ground. Here it's not strictly speaking below ground. It talks about it being lower than the ground level, but it's not strictly speaking below ground. But anyway, what they're recommending is tanking. It's been tanked in the past. I have forced this company to no longer saying that there's rising damp when they don't have evidence of that. But what they do say is there's evidence of dampness. They don't say whether it comes from rainwater, a leak, rising damp, or indeed from condensation. But virtually all the properties that I survey, well, at least probably about 60-70% have been damp proofed. The problem with damp proofing is it increases the risk of condensation, which is the main issue with properties. It will hide rainwater damage and move it to an area that hasn't been damp proofed, but that's not resulting in a solution. That's not dealing with the root cause. So I did actually go and have a look at all the different areas, and you can see it in the report in the online video. So before entering a property, I'll have read all the notes, I'll have seen the images from the owner, and I'll look at the property from the outside, and I can see it's been damp proofed in the past. Those dots at the base of the wall are signs of past damp proofing treatment. I can see that the outside walls are fairly damaged. I hear later that they're in the process of being repaired and painted, but I can see cracks in the render, and if you get render cracks, you're likely to have penetrating damp to the front, and in fact that's what's happened here. And we've also got paint, and you can see those micro cracks. That's calcium sulfate blistering behind paint. And also I clear away the drain, and I find that the drain is not connected from the downpipe through to the gully, and that would be an important recommendation. But I don't think that's the primary cause of the dampness to the front, and I'll explain why later. But the whole of the front section needs updating, and I understand that it's just about to have that. Looking at the neighbour side, their drain seems to be working fine. They don't have painted walls. Looking upstairs, we can see that the timber work needs some love. Now, inside the property, we can see the primary issue, and this is the one that's been picked up by the survey. You can see the damp proofer's ridge. Now, what happens with damp proofing treatment is rather than dealing with the root cause of damp, they replace the base of the wall with an impermeable plaster to try and block water coming through. But what will inevitably happen is that the water, in this case it's actually rainwater, will go up to the damp proofer's ridge. That's the interface between the plaster, the impermeable plaster, and the original plaster, and it will tend to form along there. And there's a brown stain. Now that's a sign of dampness passing through timber and brickwork, but it's also, in this case, it will have been affected by the plasterer's beading on the corner there. But you can see there's brown staining all the way around. Now I use a Surveyor Master damp meter. Typically I'll use it mainly in radio frequency mode because that's the more accurate. The pinpoints are just the surface, so if you're blocking the damp, you won't find it necessarily using the pin. So I wouldn't use those, and they also damage buildings, but somebody had previously used it, so I thought I would use it there just to demonstrate, just to illustrate. There's nothing at the base of the wall. but of course that's because it's been blocked by the damp proofing treatment. This is using a thermal image. You don't tell so much in summertime from this. It's more when there's a 10 degrees centigrade difference between the inside and outside. Now the kitchen extractor fan wasn't working, or at least it wasn't ducted out. There was a bathroom extractor fan in the kitchen adjacent to that, but that won't be particularly effective. Besides, the door from the kitchen to the rest of the property, well, it's open most of the time. There's mould here. Now, if there's mould, there's always excess vapor. By definition, mould results from vapor that's where the relative humidity goes above 85% for long periods of time. So it's excess vapor. Excess vapor is defined as where the internal dew point is above the external dew point. And also the extractor fan, besides being a bathroom fan and therefore having a limited output, you would need to have something like 4 times the speed, 60 litres per second, but it's also manual, and I doubt it's ever been turned on. Besides, it would be noisy, and you can see the drip marks from the condensation there. So the back of the property, you have almost exactly the same issues as the front. So it's been damp proof. So damp proofing is a bad thing because it's stopping the passage of water. It's just moving it elsewhere. It's stopping it coming through to the surface, should I say. This wall was damp mainly in the side, but it's a sort of triangular shape. So because obviously it's rainwater that's coming through. Again, we'll see that on the outside, but it's primarily coming from higher up on the wall and then moving diagonally across through absorption and gravity. The bathroom extractor fan also wasn't running very fast. It's running at 8.8, and that is plus there's mould in the bathroom, and that's because it's quite a circuitous route to the outside. You should have a continuous flow bathroom extractor fan. Now, looking at the base of the wall outside, we can see it's been damp proofed, and if you look up, firstly the wall has green at the base of the wall, which tells me that there's enough water to grow plants. But if you look at the top, the gusser's missing, so water is just going to overflow the Mr. Hopper, overflow down the wall. The wall is painted. Inevitably, water is going to get through, damage to the paintwork. And the paintwork is being repaired, repainted. What you need to do is you need to go back to either ideally back to brick. It's better not to have paint at all. But if you're going to paint, you should go back to, if there's still paint on the surface, you have to have as impermeable, if not more impermeable than the current amount of paint. There was concern that there was water falling down chimney. That's highly improbable, especially lower down. Top floors, possible, but not at the base, just because of the circuitous route of the flue. So I looked at Kenwood. I made sure that I covered every single area they said was damp, and nothing was caused by rising damp, which is what they're recommending treatment for, and B, there's a clear explanation for each element. I've been through all of the areas that Kenwood say are damp or at least need tanking. This is fast. You can slow it down if you want to have a look, but that's fine. I've given the original version to the owners, who I believe have passed it on to the buyers. So anyway, I'll just zone in on a couple of areas of interest. So firstly, in the back bedroom, there is an area where you've got some mould, and when there's mould, there's excess vapor by definition. So it means that there probably is a vapor component, but I can't detect that this time of year because it's summertime. It's in an area that where it's previously been damp proofed, and unfortunately damp proofing increases the risk of condensation and mould because you get reduced absorption and you also have loss of temperature. There's another area to the back, but what I hadn't realized at the time is actually it's external. So there's a gap between the two properties, and it is subject to some rainwater. So there is a risk of rainwater, but if you have rainwater passing through the whole way through, you would expect to see a brown stain, which is what we've got at the front and the back of the property, which is why I know penetrating damp is an element. Here, it's not passing the whole way through. However, there's a risk. And what can happen is a damp wall causes heat loss, increasing the risk of condensation. You've also got the metal of the radiator pipes there, and when they're not in use, it will cause heat loss. Have a listen to the data logger section. It is summertime, so it's not going to be as illuminating, revealing as it would be in wintertime. So I'm an open source, open resource type person, sharing information so that all surveyors can benefit. And I have created this website, damp.ai, and the subdirectory detect, and you can upload your data files here. So this is your files. This is the surface relative humidity during the period before the survey. So we were hitting 80%, which is obviously, considering it's summertime, is very high. If you look at the this pink line is the outside temperature. This is the internal temperature, so roughly the average. This is the outside dew point. Dew point is a measure of the amount of vapor in air as well as the temperature where condensation takes place at. So this is the internal dew point. This is the external dew point. And if you're in a perfectly ventilated property, the internal dew point would be the same as the external dew point, especially in summertime when you're opening windows. What you need to have is at least the internal dew point below the outside temperature, which it more or less is, except for a short period here. But I would bet you that during during winter, you are well above the outside temperature, because you can see signs of condensation, and mould only grows where relative humidity goes above 85%, which is as a result of excess internal dew point. So there is a little bit of mould. Almost every property has mould to some degree. So this is this line here, this thin grey line at the base is the dew point differential, and this tells me when there's more vapour in one room compared to the other room. So when it's above the line, it's because there's greater dew point in in this case the living room compared to the bathroom, and that will be primarily because vapor is evaporating from the wall, and conversely, when you have a shower, there'll be more vapor in the bathroom, and this is the times you're obviously having showers. And the extractor, and note how it goes from one room to the other sort of soon after a shower. So that tells me that there is insufficient ventilation from the bathroom. And I'm guessing that the kitchen also is providing lots of vapor. So all you need to do is drag and drop your files in here, and then you can do all of this yourself. So as a final wrap up, the Kenwood recommended works that would have cost 9,000 plus VAT, so about £11,000. And apparently they offer a guarantee as well, although I don't think anyone can accuse them of honouring guarantees, at least not if the root cause was damp as opposed to rising damp. They would always say, well, we've got rid of the rising damp. There was no rising damp because it's in London. Now, I have asked the PCA to stop Kenwood saying that they looked for rising damp. I can see it's come back into their reports again. So from the beginning of January, they had stopped mentioning rising damp, but now they say they look for evidence of rising dampness. They find dampness. They don't say they find rising dampness because they wouldn't have done because it's in London. They find dampness, and therefore they recommend injections and slurry, or tanking they now call it. They're an area of London that couldn't possibly have groundwater. Have a listen to this section. So for the property to be at risk of rising damp, it would have to be in a part of London that has groundwater. Well, in fact, the whole of London has groundwater pumped out between about 40 metres and 100 metres below ground. So there is no risk of rising damp. none of the companies such as Kenwood should profit from London. But anyway, if you look at the actual property, it says in the British Geological Survey that there are rocks with essentially no groundwater. If I zoom out, you'll see that most of London has no groundwater. But even if you were close to the Thames or in this area here, the water is still pumped out, so you have no risk of rising damp. The other risks are whether you are in an area that has so there is a risk of surface water, but flooding from groundwater is unlikely in this area. So let's have a look at the surface water. And if we go onto this, we can view the surface water map and zoom in. So you do have a theoretical risk of surface water, but this is about flooding from surface water. And in London, they will pump it out because obviously it's a financial risk to London as well as to individuals. And then looking at the various groundwater stations. I mean, so this is one, but you can see this is at 44, and it's a steady trend. They just pump it out. They pump it out, not least because we drink it. So in conclusion, no groundwater, therefore no rising damp because it's in London. The clear signs of penetrating damp, that's rainwater that's coming through. So you've got damage to the outside front wall where you've got the micro cracking in the paintwork, and that's coming through above the damp proofer's ridge. You've got to the back of the property, you've got that missing gutter section again onto the wall, which is growing plants, so therefore must be wet. And again, you have the micro cracking. You've got the front downpipe that's not connected to the drain, so that would cause localized damp to that area. You have the mould, so we know that there's excess vapor. Excess vapor is where the internal dew point is higher than the outside temperature. And in addition, there's a good chance that in the past there were hygroscopic salts. Have a look at my other work on hygroscopic salts. The simplest thing to do with hygroscopic salts is to cover them, or at least the modern method of dealing with hygroscopic salts is to cover them with an oil-based primer such as Zinsser's cover stain. Thank you very much.